You have spent 18 years in a cell for a crime you did not commit. You missed your 20s. You missed your 30s. The world moved on without you. And then one morning, 3 words change everything. The charge is dismissed. You are free. 2 years later, you are arrested again, this time for murder. And the county putting you behind bars is the same county that stole 18 years of your life. This is the story of Steven Avery, and nothing about it is simple. I'm Atlas. This is Dark Verdict, where we don't stop until we find the truth. Steven Avery grew up on a gravel road in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, a cold, flat stretch of the American Midwest, where most families either farmed or fished. The Averys ran an auto salvage yard. They weren't wealthy, they weren't connected, and by most accounts, they were the kind of family the county had already decided it didn't need to look at too carefully. On July 29, 1985, a woman named Penny Burnson was jogging along a Lake Michigan beach when she was attacked, beaten, and sexually assaulted. It was a horrifying crime. Law enforcement moved fast. Within weeks, Penny Burnson identified Steven Avery in a lineup. There was a problem with that lineup. Avery was the only person to appear in both the initial photo array and the live identification. Eyewitness researchers call this procedurally suggestive. The brain can convert a memory of a photograph into a false memory of that person committing the crime. Avery had 16 family members who could place him elsewhere that day. Investigators had also received a tip naming a different man, a documented sex offender named Gregory Allen, with a history of violence in that exact area. That tip was not followed up. On December 14, 1985, a jury convicted Steven Avery of attempted murder, first-degree sexual assault, and false imprisonment. He was sentenced to 32 years. Gregory Allen continued to walk free. Avery spent 18 years in that cell. He filed appeals. He maintained his innocence. In 2002, the Wisconsin Innocence Project took his case and obtained a court order for DNA testing on biological evidence from the original crime. On September 10, 2003, the Wisconsin Crime Laboratory released its findings. The DNA from Penny Burnson's attack belonged to Gregory Allen, not Steven Avery. The next day, the charges were dismissed. Steven Avery was 41 years old. He had lost 18 years. And Manitowoc County, its former sheriff, its former district attorney, had been warned. They had the tip. They had not acted. Avery filed a civil lawsuit, $36 million, against the county, former sheriff Thomas Kukurik, and former district attorney Dennis Vogel. Depositions were being scheduled. The county was facing the largest lawsuit in its history. That was the situation when Teresa Halbach arrived at the salvage yard. Teresa Halbach was 25 years old. She was a freelance photographer, known by friends for her warmth, her laugh, and her genuine eye for a good image. She worked regularly for Auto Trader magazine, photographing vehicles for private sellers across Wisconsin. On October 31, 2005, Halloween, Teresa had a full schedule of shoots across the county. One of her appointments was at the Avery salvage yard. She had been there before. She was photographing a minivan for the family to list for sale. At approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, Teresa Halbach drove her Toyota RAV4 through the gate and onto the Avery property. That was the last confirmed sighting of Teresa Halbach alive. When Teresa didn't come home that night, her friends and family became concerned. Over the following days, a search party organized. On November 5th, 5 days after her disappearance, her RAV4 was found on the Avery property, partially concealed by branches and debris. Inside the RAV4, investigators found blood. DNA testing later confirmed it as Steven Avery's. Within days, investigators also found human bone fragments in a burn pit, approximately 20 feet behind Avery's garage. Hundreds of fragments. DNA analysis identified them as Teresa Halbach's remains. Then came what would become the most contested piece of evidence in the entire case. On November 8th, during the 7th search of Avery's bedroom, after 6 previous searches had found nothing, a Manitowoc County deputy discovered a key. A single key to Teresa's RAV4. It was sitting nearly in plain sight, propped against the base of a bookcase. Forensic testing found only Steven Avery's DNA on the key. None of Teresa's. Think about that. It's her key to her car, and her DNA is not on it. Here is where this case fractures into 2 irreconcilable versions of events. Manitowoc County had formally transferred lead investigative authority to neighboring Calumet County because of the pending $36 million lawsuit. They acknowledged the conflict of interest. And yet Manitowoc County deputies participated in searches of Avery's property. They were present, and it was a Manitowoc County deputy who found that key. Steven Avery was arrested on November 9, 2005. He was charged with first-degree intentional homicide. The evidence at trial fell into two camps. They have never been fully reconciled. The prosecution's case rested on four pillars. First, Steven Avery's DNA was found under the hood of Teresa's RAV4, on the interior surface of the hood latch. This is sweat DNA. It requires direct physical contact. It is, forensically, one of the hardest categories of evidence to fabricate. Second, a bullet fragment recovered from Avery's garage contained Teresa Halbach's DNA. This placed the garage as the location of her death. Third, the bone fragments, hundreds of them, identified as Teresa's, 20 feet from Avery's garage. Fourth, Brendan Dassey's confession. Brendan Dassey was 16 years old and Avery's nephew. He had a documented IQ in the low 70s. Over several interrogation sessions in February 2006, during which he was not always accompanied by a parent or an attorney, he confessed. He described in graphic detail helping Avery assault and kill Teresa in the garage and bedroom. His account shifted substantially between sessions. Details he provided were frequently prompted by investigators before he volunteered them. Interrogators named the victim, described the location, and suggested specific acts before Brendan confirmed them. He later recanted, telling his mother he had made it all up because the detectives told him what they wanted to hear. In 2016, a federal judge agreed. Judge William Duffin ruled Brendan's confession was unconstitutionally coerced and overturned his conviction. The following year, a full panel of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals reversed that ruling 4 votes to 3, reinstating the conviction. The United States Supreme Court declined to hear his appeal. Brendan Dassey's first parole eligibility is the year 2048. He will be in his late 50s. The defense challenged every pillar. On the blood in the RAV4 stored in the clerk's office of Manitowoc County Courthouse was a vial of Avery's blood from the 1985 rape case. When investigators examined it during the murder investigation, the vial had a puncture hole in the rubber stopper. The seal on the outer box had been tampered with. The defense argued that blood had been extracted and planted inside Teresa's car. The prosecution's counter was an FBI-developed test for EDTA, a chemical preservative present in evidence files but not naturally in human blood. If the car's bloodstains contained EDTA, it would confirm the blood came from a stored vial. The FBI concluded, no EDTA detected. The defense pointed out the test was developed in extraordinary haste, without the years of validation normally required before such evidence is admitted in court. Independent scientists expressed concern. The question has never been fully settled. On the key, the prosecution offered no explanation for the absence of Teresa's DNA on her own key. The defense noted it was found on the 7th search by a Manitowoc County deputy, the same department being sued for $36 million. After Making a Murderer was released on Netflix in December 2015, reaching tens of millions of viewers and reigniting worldwide debate, attorney Kathleen Zellner took on Avery's case. Her investigation identified what she says are dozens of forensic irregularities. Her central alternate suspect theory focuses on Bobby Dassey, Brendan's older brother, who was at the salvage yard the day Teresa disappeared. A new witness claimed to have seen Bobby Dassey behaving suspiciously near Teresa's vehicle. Data retrieved from the family's computer, Zellner says, shows Bobby Dassey accessed disturbing images of women on the day of the murder. The Wisconsin Supreme Court declined to allow this alternate suspect evidence to be presented. Zellner has announced plans to file a federal habeas petition, which would be the first time Avery's case reached federal court. In January 2025, the Wisconsin Court of Appeals rejected Avery's latest petition for a new hearing, ruling against him on all 3 issues raised, including his request to present evidence of an alternate suspect. Both Steven Avery and Brendan Dassey remain imprisoned in Wisconsin state penitentiaries. The $36 million lawsuit against Manitowoc County was settled in February 2006 after Avery's arrest for $400,000, a fraction of the original claim. The county that had wrongfully imprisoned him once paid less than 1% of what he had been seeking. The public debate has not settled. Legal analysts, forensic experts, and true crime communities remain sharply divided. Those who believe Avery is guilty point to the DNA under the hood latch, the bullet fragment, and the bone fragments. Those who believe the system failed him again point to the conflict of interest, the blood vial, and the key found only on the 7th search. Making a Murderer remains one of the most watched documentary series in Netflix history. It did not prove innocence, but it raised questions that have never been answered. What no one has yet been able to tell us with certainty is what happened at that salvage yard on that Halloween night in 2005. Teresa Halbach deserves a complete answer. She has not gotten one. Now, my verdict. What follows is my personal analysis. It is not established fact. Judge it accordingly. I cannot tell you Steven Avery is innocent. I do not know that. What I can tell you is that the case against him carries fractures significant enough that, for me, reasonable doubt is not just possible, it is inescapable. Consider what the prosecution's theory requires you to accept. A man who had just been exonerated after the most devastating injustice of his life, who was in the middle of a $36 million lawsuit that he was likely to win, decided to murder a woman he had met before on his own property on a day she was scheduled to arrive and left her bones 20 feet from his garage. That is not impossible, but it strains something. Now, consider the alternative, that every critical piece of evidence, the key, found on the seventh search, the blood from a vial with a punctured stopper, the DNA under the hood, was either found by the one department in the state with documented financial motive to put Avery away, or carries a question the prosecution never fully answered. The prosecution's strongest point remains the bones. Bone fragments identified as Teresa's were found on Avery's property. The defense claim that they were moved from another location has not been proven. That stays with me. But my verdict, the conviction of Steven Avery, represents at minimum a catastrophic failure of procedural integrity. Whether or not he is guilty, the process by which he was convicted in a county that had every reason to want him in a cell cannot satisfy the standard justice demands. That is not exoneration. It is a verdict of reasonable doubt. And for a man, this system has already failed once. That should matter enormously. If this case moved you, share it. The more eyes on stories like this, the more pressure on every system to get it right. Subscribe to Dark Verdict. New episodes every Wednesday and Saturday. Next week, a vacant lot in Los Angeles, 1947. A woman found with horrifying precision. No suspect ever charged. The Black Dahlia, coming next. I'm Atlas. The verdict is never final until the truth is found.